Hey guys, welcome back to the show. For today's solo episode, I decided to do something a little bit different than usual. I mean, sometimes we talk about peptides, sometimes we talk about really cool hacks, or we talk about supplements or gizmos and what have you, or really high tech stuff. But today I decided, let's pull back to basics a little bit and let's talk about 5 of the lifestyle habits that you might just still have hanging around that are actually accelerating your aging. And look, if you're listening to this podcast, either you're doing a lot or you're trying to do a lot or you're thinking about doing a lot. And, sometimes it just comes down to some of the most simple things we need to do and some of the things that we don't think of as necessarily aging. So look, we all know that eating processed foods, smoking, all of these things accelerate aging. They actually speed up aging. It's not just a question of they are bad for you. It's just a question of causing enough damage, and in particular with smoking, causing enough damage to your DNA, causing enough driving reactive oxygen species, inserting toxins into your body. These things are not only, quote, bad for you, but they also accelerate your rate of aging. And what's the point of spending all this money on all these supplements or doing all these crazy things if you're going to be driving the wrong way with some of these habits? So anyway, we all know about smoking. We all know about processed foods. And so I wanted to maybe talk about a couple of other things. And so there's basically 4 things I'm going to talk about today. And then I'm going to talk about some of the things that you can do to offset them and why these things might actually be really super effective. And none of them is going to be anything that you need to go out and buy. All right. So we're not talking about supplements today. We're not talking about peptides. We're just talking about the things that you can do to live a healthier, longer life. And as an example for that, I want to draw on something that I will often mention when I myself am interviewed on podcasts and people ask me about, what are the most important things people can do to slow down their aging or live to be 100 and to be healthy? And I will often point to some of the centenarians, like most of the centenarians who are around these days, who frankly are not people who necessarily set out to live 100 years, or octogenarians, or octo would be 8, whatever the 90arian, super agers are. And I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about people in their 90s or their hundreds who are, feeble and not able to take care of their own needs and who are not living a fulfilled life. Like, we're talking about people who are still very much with it and very much enjoying their lives. And so when we look at those people that are around today, for the most part, they didn't really set out with this intention. They just lived their life. And when we ask them, what are you attributing your longevity to? I mean, some of them will talk about having a drink every day. Some of them will talk about having a cigarette. Actually, there was one recently I read about who actually talked about, was a smoker. So how could that be, right? Like, smoking is so toxic. Well, I want you to think about the fact that these people who live till 100, let's think back 100 years ago, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, even 60 years ago, the world that they were living in was completely different, right? They lived in a far less toxic world. They had a very different lifestyle than we have today. I mean, the pace of our life is incredible. No matter how hard you try, unless you're living on a mountaintop with no technology around you, the amount of information coming at us, the speed at which we're expected to respond, the speed at which we expect ourselves to respond, the amount of different things going on in our world at any given moment is astronomical. And that'll all make sense when I talk about a couple of these things that speed up aging. So these guys weren't necessarily doing stem cells. They weren't taking peptides. They weren't taking any kind of fancy supplements. They were getting a lot of what they needed from their environment, from their food, and from their social connections. And I would say that social connections plays a massive role in our ability to age better. So, and certainly to slow aging down. So conversely, let's talk a little bit about the things that speed up aging. And going back to the smoking thing, because I'm a little self-conscious about having even said that, for the most part, people who smoke age faster. They die sooner. There are a couple of phenoms out there. And, the man who is editing this podcast right now will laugh because I don't know how old his grandmother is now and if she's still around. But back in the day when I first met him, he would talk about his grandmother who was in her 90s, who drank and smoked every single day. And there are people whose bodies are set up to deal with toxins much more efficiently than the rest of us. But I'm going to say that they are very few and far between, and they are probably not exposed to that many toxins in their environment as well. A lot of the ways that the body deals with toxic load has to do with load. And if it's overwhelmed, it's not going to be able to manage the damage. So setting aside these outliers, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that really drive accelerated aging. So one of them is this narrative that I still hear a lot of people talk about, which is sleep. They don't prioritize sleep. They'll have this story in their heads that's like, oh my God, you know what? I'll sleep when I'm dead. I've got way too much to do. Life is too fun, or I can't sleep, or I don't want to sleep, or I don't have time to sleep, or they will sacrifice sleep so that they can go to gym early in the morning. And I will tell you that, and I'm going to repeat this to you, and many of you probably know this, but if you know this and you know someone who doesn't buy into this, then you got to share this with them, right? Your body is not doing nothing when you're sleeping. Far from it. When you're sleeping, your body is busy. It is consolidating memories and information. Your brain is rejuvenating. Your lymphatic system, that lymphatic system that operates in your brain, is clearing toxins from the day. You are building muscle, assuming that you exercise and assuming that you move. You are repairing damage. You need to sleep. And you need to sleep well. So here's the thing. If you, let's say, snore and your partner has moved out of the bedroom into another bedroom, or you know that you snore, or you wake up in the morning and you're exhausted, people, there are so many tools available right now to fix that. You can go to a holistic dentist and you can get a 360-degree cone imaging done. And this will look to identify why is it that you're snoring. Now, if you're carrying around an extra 50, 60, 70 pounds or a considerable amount of extra weight, that will drive snoring. And sometimes just losing that weight can help to reduce snoring dramatically. But as we age, tissues get lax, things don't sit the way they used to, and definitely it can increase obstruction of the air passage. And so you may need to change your sleeping position. You may need to think about different strategies to improve your sleep. There's a laser treatment that can be done to the palate, to the upper palate of the mouth, that can help to tighten up that tissue. Sometimes that can help people. Maybe you broke your nose when you were a kid or when you were younger and your septum is deviated. Well, that can be fixed. So really, sometimes it's not as simple as just slapping mouth tape on, right? You need to understand, why are you waking up exhausted in the morning, assuming that you're giving yourself enough hours to sleep. And that amount of time actually, depending on the person, there are some people that can get away with 6.5, as little as 6.5 hours of sleep if they sleep efficiently, if they're good sleepers. For most of us, it's going to be 7.5, maybe 8 hours. All right. So you should be able to get enough good quality sleep in about 8 hours a night. Obviously, you want to make sure that your bedroom is dark and cool and all those good things. But prioritizing sleep is a massive, massive piece of the puzzle if we want to age well. So if you're still carrying around this story that I'll sleep when I'm dead, just know that you are aging faster. You are aging yourself faster than you need to. And that means for your body, and it also means for your mind. So all of those things are going to trot along at a faster rate towards the aging finish line. All right, that's sleep. Number 2, we're going to talk about unchecked stress, chronic stress that is not addressed. So if you're running around most of the time or all of the time, mega stressed because of your job, because of the people in your life, because of a to-do list that is just never ending, because of the situation in the world. I mean, look, there's plenty to stress about these days. We know that. But the truth of the matter is that we do have the power to manage how this stress affects us. Stress drives up a hormone called cortisol, drives up all the stress hormones. Cortisol is particularly catabolic, and catabolic means this is a tear down hormone. This is a hormone that breaks things down. It prevents you from repairing. It also drives up inflammation, right? So chronic stress is going to crank up cortisol. It's going to crank up inflammation. It's going to wreak havoc with your ability to think properly. And I would say that all of these things also apply to poor sleep, by the way. Poor sleep also cranks up your cortisol, cranks up your inflammation, negatively impacts your immune system. And the worst part about bad sleep, well, one of the worst parts about bad sleep, quite apart from the fact that you can't function well the next day, what happens is that you end up having worse cravings for carbs and for sugar because your brain is looking for fast energy. And it knows that it can get really quick energy from a stack of cookies or a bunch of chips or whatever the case may be. Your adrenals are struggling also. They're looking for salt, right? So I know I just fell back to sleep, but sleep, chronic stress, the net result is not that different, right? When you don't sleep well, you're also more likely to experience more stress because you're less resilient. And when you're experiencing chronic stress, all of these negative hormones and chemicals are flowing through your body. And in both cases, your immune system is being compromised. So manage your stress. And I know you probably want to reach through the phone, whatever you're listening to me on, and punch me in the face right now and say, dude, if I could make my stress go away, I'd be more than happy. Why don't you come on over here and solve my problems for me? Look, like I said at the beginning of this section, we all have stress. You have stress. There's stress that there are stressful events that you cannot control. The thing you can control, the only thing you can control is your response to stress and how much that stress affects you personally. So I'm going to invite you to explore different strategies to help you to become more resistant or resilient to stress. And different things are going to work for different people. I could sit here and say, become a master meditator and stress will never affect you again. Great. That's going to take a couple of decades to get to. That's not going to be very helpful right now. Some people find that the act of practicing meditation, even in the short term, is helpful for them. They find that they are more resilient, that stressful things don't affect them as much. If that's you, that's amazing. But it may not be you. So here's another option. Something like breath work, learning to do a box breath or deep breathing, right? Periodically during the day when you can feel your stress going up, when you can feel your shoulders creeping up around your ears, and you literally, check in with yourself and notice, try and roll your shoulders down. Notice how often you're walking around and those shoulders are hanging out up around your ears somewhere. Just lowering your shoulders, taking a deep breath in and a slow exhale. Doing this a couple of times will be dramatically impactful at helping you to manage the stress. You will become better at it over time. Asking yourself the question, is there anything I can do about this? Do I need to release this responsibility? I mean, there's so many different things we can ask ourselves, even things like turning the news off. I know people who live with the TV on and the news on all the time. And I can tell you that would drive anybody into a state of chronic stress. Yes, we know that the world is a crazy place. It kind of always has been, but it certainly seems to be even crazier these days. I don't care what side of the divide you're on. It's a nutty place. Please give yourself a break. Step away. Go for a walk. Exercise. Hang out with a friend. All of these things will help to lower your stress levels and find a way to create that little bit of space, that buffer between you and what's going on in the outside world, and kind of get yourself into a place of what I would call maybe acceptance or equanimity. In acceptance that things are not always perfect, things might be far from perfect, but we can still live in a space of gratitude for what we do have, gratitude for the things that are going well in our lives, or for people in our lives, or whatever it is that you can find in your life that is positive. Focus on that. Focus on that cup half full, let's say, and tap into ways that'll help you to lower those stress levels just a little bit. And it's going to be different for everybody, right? So like I said, it could be meditation, it could be breath work, it could be going for a run, it could be going to the gym, it could be going dancing, it could be picking up a new hobby, it could be reading a book. There's so many different ways. It could, for some of us, it could be jumping into a cold shower or jumping into a cold plunge. It's not always going to be the right answer, but for a lot of people, they find that that shock is enough to kind of get them to snap out of it. It gets the endorphins going when you get out of there, and boom, you feel better. So managing stress is going to be a critical piece of the puzzle if we don't want to be galloping towards those advanced years. Those of you who may have listened to my interviews with Dr. Bill Lawrence, who works with people using bioregulator peptides to turn back the clock on their biological age. When I first interviewed him, we looked at a table with the results of all of his subjects. And there were two people in particular who had seen no improvement in their biological age, as opposed to, as measured by telomeres, by the way, as opposed to people who saw a reversal of 8 years and 10 years and 20 years in some cases. Like, it was crazy. And I'm like, well, what is it with those two people? Did they not take their bioregulators? Were they sick? What was it about them that made it that they did not reverse their biological age? And his answer to me was, you know what, Nat? I know these people really well, all of these people that are in my study. And those two people were under stupendous levels of stress over the past year. And that crazy amount of stress that they were not able to mitigate or manage for themselves for whatever reason, actually what was interesting is they didn't get older because they were taking all these bioregulators, but they also didn't get any younger. So accelerated aging can be driven by, so far, two things that we've talked about, two S's: poor sleep or not enough sleep, and chronic stress, unmanaged stress. Number 3 is going to be a sedentary lifestyle. Now, some of you already know this, but I'm going to say that the other side of the coin here, there's two sides to this coin. There's a sedentary lifestyle for those people who don't move barely at all. And the next one is going to be over-exercising. And this is for the people who just can't stop. People who insist on going to the gym 7 days a week, come hell or high water, even though they know that they're not recovering from their last workout. They barely have the energy to get themselves to the gym. They barely have the energy to get through the workout. And yet, for whatever reason, they still keep going. So let's deal with the first problem first, and then we'll deal with the second issue second. Okay. So the first one is having a sedentary life. Living a sedentary life can lead to accelerated aging. How does it do this? People who don't move lose muscle. It's quite simple. The body will not hang on to muscle if it doesn't need it, and it won't need it if you're not using it. So it's very much a use it or lose it equation. We naturally will lose muscle as we age, and we definitely lose muscle if we're not challenging our bodies to keep it. And as you lose that muscle mass, guess what? You're also going to lose bone. And what else are you going to lose? You're going to lose your metabolic flexibility. You're going to lose the ability to manage your nutrient status in your body. And so you're more likely to become insulin resistant if you eat the wrong foods. And you're more likely to essentially just not be metabolically healthy. Your heart's not going to be as healthy. Your brain's not going to be as healthy. Why? Because when you move, when you exercise, that drives blood flow, and your brain needs blood flow. So I'm not getting deep into the science here, but at a very mechanistic, simplistic way, not doing any exercise, not moving our bodies, allowing ourselves to just sit there and let everything pool, drives aging. It increases inflammation, and it certainly doesn't do anything to lower it, right? And you're probably, as people are just sitting around, they're not managing their stress, they're probably eating not the best diet. It all kind of follows. And if they're sitting around all day, not expending any energy, it's very likely also that their sleep is not going to be so great. So you need to move your body, preferably get yourself outside at least a couple of times a day, because that's going to help you to breathe in a little bit of better air. Having said that, I know if you live in a big city, it's polluted out there, but at the same time, find yourself a forest, find a park, get in nature. And that in and of itself is going to help you to get moving. It's going to help to manage your stress, because we know that nature helps to calm our nervous system down. And it might just, getting outside might also just help you to get better night's sleep. So move your body. This is movement. Exercise. Increase your heart rate at least 3 times a week. Get out walking every single day. Minimum of 20 minutes to get started. If you can work yourself up to an hour, a half an hour, 45 minutes, even eventually an hour, that is amazing. And this is what you want. Okay. You don't need to be running marathons. You don't need to be climbing mountains. Now, if that floats your boat and that's what you want to do, by all means. But I'm telling you now, if you're in a sedentary place in your life, get out, get off your chair and get moving. Okay. Now let's look at the flip side of the coin. The over-exercisers, the people that are running a marathon like every day, or that feel that they have to exercise an hour or 2 hours every single day. Otherwise, terrible things will happen. So here's the interesting paradox. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And we typically see that people who over-exercise drive. It's a paradox, right? Appropriate amount of exercise is going to lower inflammation over time. It's going to improve your blood flow. It's going to improve your cardiovascular system. It's going to make your brain healthier. But conversely, exercising too much and too often, and I'm really talking about over-exercisers here, right? I'm talking about people who are like a couple hours a day. They just can't stop themselves. And especially as you age, you need more time to recover in between workouts. So you need to either vary your workouts so that you're doing yoga and walking one day and something really intense the next day, which I do recommend. I recommend lifting very heavy weights. I recommend doing some kind of a sprint workout. So whether it's on a Carol bike or you speed up the walk every few minutes, or your run if you're a runner. But definitely if you over exercise, you are going to accelerate your aging as well. Frankly, you're going to just wear out your parts. So finding a sweet spot for exercise. And if you're sedentary right now, your sweet spot's going to be different than someone who's already active or someone who's over exercising. You also know that you're over exercising if your immune system is going down all the time. It's another paradox. If you don't exercise, your immune system suffers. But if you over-exercise, your immune system also suffers. So exercise is one of these things where you definitely want to find a sweet spot. And I promise you that you will feel better if you don't exercise and you do. And conversely, if you over-exercise and you pull back a little bit, you will feel better, both emotionally and physically. All right. So poor sleep. Unchecked stress, exercise too much or too little, right? So exercise, we need to find that sweet spot. All right. Next one is really interesting one. And it's one that I think we know it's been talked about, but we don't talk about it enough. And that is loneliness and or lack of social connection. So there are some really interesting studies in this area that show that people who are isolated do poorly. Ironically, it's the same mechanism. It's the same physiological issues. It's an increase in cortisol. It's an increase in inflammation. Loneliness also leads very often to poor lifestyle choices. Now, I want to make a distinction here. I'm not talking about people who just really enjoy spending time on their own, right? But I'm talking about people who are just lonely. They lack community. They lack connection to other people. And if that's you, if you're listening to this and you're feeling super isolated and by yourself, then I would encourage you to get out there and find a hobby. The best way to meet people. And I mean, look, I know it's not easy to make new friends when you're an adult. It's a lot harder. People are busy. They're tied up in their own lives. They've got their friends. Depending on where you live, people might not be so open to meeting new people. Well, in that case, it's the best way to meet people is to get out there and do something that you love and find some kind of a community that you can connect to that also loves that. So it could be cooking. It could be exercising. It could be a book club. It could be a church. I mean, faith-based connection is also super, super helpful. And so for you, it might be reconnecting with your faith. It might be reconnecting with old friends. It might be making new friends through new activities. But tackling loneliness as a problem, loneliness in and of itself will actually accelerate aging through all of these different mechanisms of action. And there's been research done on this, right? And we all know that during COVID, one of the things that hit people the hardest was the isolation and the loneliness that set in. So I'm going to talk now also about one of the things that we can do that seems to offset a lot of these things. And it's an interesting one because when I first thought of this, I thought, oh my God, there's probably like 1 million studies that show that owning a pet absolutely reduces your chances of dying. And when you first look this up, you will find tons of headlines that says owning a pet decreases your risk of dying by 24% or 30% or whatever the case may be. But when you get past the first headlines, you start to come across data that says, actually, when we looked at all of these studies much more closely and we corrected for social status, we corrected for basically they found that people who are of certain social walks of life, as it were more prone to have a pet. And this was skewing the data. People with more money tended to own a pet, and that was skewing the data. So, but here's what's true about owning a pet. Number one, if loneliness is an issue, owning a pet, particularly something like a cat or a dog that are mammals, and so they are, they're going to give you companionship. Like a bird won't necessarily give you the same type of companionship. A lizard, cold-blooded animal, you might think they're giving you companionship. And if you do, that's great. Goldfish, not so much. But cats and dogs in particular, because we get to pet them, because we physically get to interact with them, we get an increase in dopamine and oxytocin. And these are hormones that make us feel good. And these are hormones that naturally are going to help to turn the tides on accelerated aging. Now, in addition, if you have a dog, most likely, and believe me, I've seen plenty of people who are very unhealthy, who as a result have very unhealthy dogs, right? And so they're not moving much. But if you have a dog and that dog helps you to get outside and to be more active and to meet people, right? So now you create a new community. I will tell you, my mother-in-law still lives on her own. The woman is, hopefully she doesn't mind me saying this on a podcast, she's 93 years old. Her social connections are unbelievable. And a big chunk of them have to do with the people in her neighborhood that they all walk their dogs together. It's super cool. And it's a very, very strong community. And it keeps them active, both physically and socially. So owning a dog, I think a dog in particular, but a cat person could be sitting there going, no, Nat, you've got it all wrong. It's actually having a cat. Whatever the case may be. The truth is, I think dogs are a bit more powerful because they get you outside, because they make you move. I mean, unless you have one of those little dogs that doesn't like walking. So if you're going to get a dog for longevity purposes, I encourage you to get the kind that actually goes out and walks, not so much a lap dog. There are things about owning a dog that even though it doesn't always pan out in the research, there are aspects to owning a pet that will help you to live longer and healthier just because of all of these different things that I just mentioned, right? It's the companionship, it's the oxytocin and the dopamine, it's the getting outside, it's the keeping you moving, it's giving people a purpose. And there are studies that show that people who own dogs in particular, especially kids that grew up with dogs, have a more resilient immune system. They're less prone to allergies. They don't get sick as often. And there's lots of different reasons for that, but definitely it seems to produce a more resilient immune system. And part of that could be that we're living in an overly sanitized society, and bringing an animal, a pet, into the house brings a little bit of dirt. It brings a little bit of germs into your world. Plus, by having that, the cuddling, the oxytocin, the dopamine, all the feel-good hormones, that also is great for your immune system. So how long have I been Man, I've been talking about this for 30 minutes now. Can you believe it? So here it is, right? So things that will make you age faster are things like poor sleep, unchecked stress, too much or too little exercise, loneliness that is unaddressed, right? But we can solve a lot of these problems. And I'm not pitching everybody to go buy a dog right now. Dogs are a big responsibility, and you have to have the right lifestyle for it. But maybe you could borrow a dog, or you can foster a dog. Having a pet can definitely be, for some people, part of the solution. But the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but the next thing is to remain, the social connections are very important. Having a purpose, being grateful, having gratitude in your life, those social connections are really, really, really critical, because they also keep your brain engaged. So doing crossword puzzles, not social connection, but we all know people who retired, but they're still very busy people. They're still very engaged. Whether they're playing mahjong, or they're playing pickleball, or maybe they are volunteering because they're not interested in mahjong or pickleball, but volunteering is their jam, or they don't, that's another way of building social connections and meeting people. Sometimes it's giving of yourself, and that also gives back. Right? It brings you back that sense of purpose and that sense of connection. So no fancy stuff today. Nothing, no codes, nothing to go out and buy. I just wanted to share with you some of these things that sometimes maybe we don't think about so much, and that we can maybe tweak a little bit before we start running around trying to buy stuff, or, what's the next greatest supplement or rejuvenation strategy. They're all super valid, but we've got to take care of these foundations first before they can really pay off for us. So I'm going to thank you so much for being here, for sticking with me, hopefully to the end. If you got value from this episode, please make sure to share it out with your friends, and know that the membership community that I talk about all the time, we're actually changing platforms. So if you go to natnidham.com and the membership community doesn't allow you to join right now, it's because we're still under construction. But add your name to the list, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be the first to know when we reopen it. So thank you so much for being here. I love connecting with you guys. Let me know what you thought about this episode, and let me know if you're ready maybe to go into the more advanced stuff. And we'll jump into something a little more geeky next time I do a solo. All right. Have a great day, night, morning, whatever. And we'll see you next time.